Well, just to give you guys some background information, I'm sure you guys have heard in the news a lot recently about gun shootings such as Arizona. I believe Arizona was one, University of Oregon. A couple years ago, the Colorado shootings in a theater. And it seems that lately in the news, everything we've heard is gun control. President Obama has said this has become too common already. Hillary Clinton actually vowed to use executive action if she's voted for president. However, we never hear anything good coming from the usage of guns. You know, we don't really hear, such as the shooting of Fort Hood, that a soldier that was armed stopped the criminal. So therefore, my claim today is that, well, actually, if we notice that all these places that there's been shootings in, they have one thing in common, that these places are places that actually restrict guns. They're gun-free zones, that's called. Therefore, my claim is today is that restrictions on gun control, increased restriction on guns will actually result in even more mass murders or even more crime. First of all, restrictions on guns actually lead to greater gun use and violence. If we see Europe as some of the strictest gun control there is, you know, in England, only most of the time, perhaps the only people who have guns is police, and even then, many of them don't carry guns. If we look at Holland, according to Professor Don Cates and Gary Mauser from the, who are two criminologists from the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy, Holland's murder rate is nearly the worst, despite having the lowest gun ownership rate in Western Europe. So you can see that something isn't right here. If a country has the least gun ownership, if a country has some of the strictest gun controls, how is it that they have some of the worst murder rates? So also, if we looked at England, guns are practically banned in England. But actually, from 1999 to 2009, the list of firearm crime rose 89%. So, if we begin to see the trend is that places where there's more gun control actually has led to more violence. However, if we notice here in the United States, that according to Hans Bader, pro-gun states actually have low homicide rates. For example, Vermont had the third lowest homicide rate in 2013, the lowest gun murder rate in 2010, and the second lowest gun murder rate in 2007 from 2010. Also, South Dakota had the fourth lowest gun homicide rate in 2007 to 2010. So we can see that the lesser gun control actually led to lower crime. Also, gun restrictions in areas where guns are not allowed cannot prevent mass shootings from occurring. I'm sure you guys have heard about the Paris attack, terrorist attack. If we look at that, the Paris attack by extremists or terrorists occurred in a country where gun usage is highly controlled. But for terrorists and criminals, it's easy to get the weapons. If we see, according to a European Union official who spoke in anonymity because he wasn't actually authorized to speak this, he said they're available even to average criminals, all these weapons. You can find weapons for sale near the train station in Brussels. Actually, for the Paris attacks, they were able to obtain an entire arsenal of AK-47 assault rifles, pistols, a submachine gun, and even a rocket-propelled grenade. And all of this was purchased for $5,000. So we can see that, which leads to my next point, that even with tough control law, gun control laws, criminals still find a way to get guns because a determined criminal will find a way to get weapons. You know, a gun is not a person; it's an inanimate object. There you go. Guns don't have a brain. People are the criminals. And according to Jerry Singer, a spokesman for the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms in Chicago, the vast majority of licensees are honest. However, criminals always find a way to get guns. A common way for criminals to get guns is from licensed and unlicensed street dealers who sell them. Another common way is to buy weapons from corrupt home dealers. And a lesser known way is that criminals, they steal their guns. So we can see that in all this, even though we're restricting guns, criminals are still finding a way to get them. Like I said earlier, in England, from 1989 to 1999, it rose to 89%. How is it that the murder rate rose to 89%? How is it that a country which prides itself in not having any more guns anymore, that actually has restricted gun control, still had a very big growth of gun murder and violence? Because criminals still found a way to get their guns. However, in many cases, these things are stopped by people who actually, good people, as you can say, who carry guns. So my point to bring to you guys once again is that increased restrictions on gun controls actually have led to more violence and more mass murders. And if this continues, more increasing gun control, which actually the president is trying to increase, it will most likely lead to more murders and more.
All right, I think you need to be a little bit more specific when you're using the shootings as your attention device. You're a little bit vague in the references, and it's not that hard to get those facts right so that you seem a lot more authoritative and credible at the beginning. The Obama quote and the Hillary Clinton example suggests a little bit of controversy on the issue. I think that's fine. The proposition, when it is stated, is kind of awkwardly phrased, and it's got multiple parts to it. There's no preview of what the supporting structure is going to be, so that's a little bit of a problem for the listeners. You need to kind of give us a direction about how the argument is going to develop. Now, you did signpost the individual points in the body of the speech. The first one was very clear. The second and the third one, you kind of signpost them after you've begun making those arguments, and you want to be a little bit more consistent and have transitions that are smoother on those points. The evidence that you have, you've got some examples that you point to. The Paris shooting, for instance, is one of the ones that you talk about. There's some statistical information that you make reference to in England. The factual data that you talk about in Holland, I don't know that you gave. I assume that's from the Cates data. You need to be a little bit clearer about where the information comes from there. I thought that you started off citing information like that, and then later in the presentation I thought there was less consistency about the source citations. Your general argument at the end, I think, is summarized reasonably well, although the second and the third points seem to be basically the same argument, which is that you can't keep guns out of the hands of criminals, you can't stop criminals from committing these acts. And you say it two or three different ways, but it basically is the same argument there. So I'm not sure that it needs to be a third point on your argument. Okay, thank you.